Before I start, I'm honoured to see everyone online and hardy souls who have made it out here in person. Especially as I was just saying, I was warned that I'm competing with a rather large sporting event. So I admire everyone's dedication to being here. For those who are online and listening to the recording, I've just posted it's the same handout as last week. We're really just trying to finish off the introductory psukim of Mishley. What I'd like to do today is, and I'm going to finish also slightly early, I'd like to try and finish off the introduction and then try and just actualize this, because we spent a few weeks looking at all these sort of psukim that float around terminology. This is our third week of psukim floating around terminology for learning and wisdom and foolishness, and these are big words that crop up throughout Mishley, and I just want to try and draw out what we can of what this actually means in practice. So we're up to Pasuk 5 of the introduction, which is the sort of top box in the handout sheet. Yishma Chacham v'Yosef lekach. The Chacham, the wise person, listens and adds learning. The Novon Tachbulos Yikna, and the understanding person acquires strategies. So just to talk about what these terms mean, I'm not going to dwell on this pasuk, but the Chacham, we already said, is really about absorbing and understanding that which is external to oneself. So in Torah context, it's that which we receive from Hashem or we receive from others. Masha Adam Makabel Mirabi, that which one receives from a teacher. In secular wisdom, it's about what the external world teaches us. You always need information, and that which comes in from outside and from beyond. A Chacham is a wise person in the sense that it doesn't just mean someone who's sort of learned to parrot information. They've absorbed the information, they know it, but they haven't yet developed the quality of Bina, which is made in Dover Mitoch Dover, to understand something from something else, maybe linked to Bona, to build. They haven't yet achieved that sort of insight and understanding. And they haven't yet had Das, which is integration into self. Das is when it becomes part of you. So it affects how you view life, how you live your life, the lenses through which you experience things. That hasn't yet happened either. So the Chacham is Yosef Lekach. They'll get extra teaching. So by learning Mishley, the Chacham will add on additional teachings. But the Novon, the person who knows how to be Maven Dover, Mitoch Dover, who understands one thing from another, they will get strategies from this, or tachbulos. In a moment, we'll define that word. In other words, Shlomo HaMelech here is saying what this book is about Masholim. Masholim are parables, as we discussed at the beginning. In other words, the quality of a parable is that I'm taking something that you understand and is comprehensible to you, and from that you're drawing out deeper wisdom. That's what a parable always is. So I take an easy example that's familiar and which you can relate to, and after that you can understand the concept which you otherwise would be unrelatable to. That's how we explain parables. And Shlomo HaMelech, to some degree, is viewing the whole of life as a parable. He says everything we experience in this world is something from which you can draw greater depth. So he says the Chacham will enhance their Torah knowledge through understanding additional Torah by understanding these parables. And the Maven, the one who has the power of deducing, Maven Dover, Mitoch Dover, deduction, understanding one thing from another, they can understand tachbulos. Now, what exactly is the meaning of the word tachbula? Strategy. So the Ibn Ezra and the Malbim both say it's linked to the word chevel. A chevel is a rope. And the point is that it attaches one thing to another. So in two ways, what does a rope do for you? The first thing a rope does is it allows you to pull things along or connect. A rope is a connecting device. That's really what a rope is. So a rope allows you to connect to things which are further removed from you and string them together. In fact, one good way of defining understanding and insight and building one thing from another, understanding one thing from another, is that it allows you to connect things and string things, interconnect things. That's almost the definition of what we mean by learning, that you're interconnecting things. So In fact, almost the definition of intelligence and insight and understanding is the ability to connect different things. A great scientist or a great philosopher or a great author or a great artist or a great Talmud Chacham can connect different areas together, and out of that something more can emerge. So tachbulos means chevel means interlinking different ideas. The Malbim also points out that a chevel, a rope itself, is strong because it's made from many intertwining strings or intertwining threads. If you just have a thread, it's a thread. When you intertwine them, then you end up with a rope. So tachbulos is something about connecting and intertwining ideas, and that's the chacham and the novin, the wise person who gets lekach, and the novon who acquires tachbula and manages to intertwine things and wind them together and build a strength from that. The Vilna Gaon says a very beautiful insight. He says that the lekach means from the root kicha, to take, that which you just take. The chacham receives things as a present, a gift, in other words. Everything is gifted to him. He receives teachings from his teacher, and he receives insight and wisdom and information from the world. It's not really a two-way relationship. I mean, you may have to pay a teacher or not, depending on what the case is. There's not really a two-way relationship. A teacher may gain from a student, but that happens to be that the teacher gains from the student, they gain from it, but it's not something that the student consciously gives to the teacher. On the contrary, if it's a two-way relationship, it's not appropriate in terms of boundaries. The teacher shouldn't be using the student for themselves, for their own needs or their own ego or their own fulfillment. There's nothing wrong with the teacher getting fulfillment from teaching, but it's not meant to be a symmetrical relationship. The mission officers are say l'chorav, make for yourself a teacher. In other words, the teacher is the teacher, and I get from them that which I can. But then the mission officer says, knei l'chachave, acquire for yourself a friend. Now, or buy for yourself a friend. Now, buying for yourself a friend seems very bad advice. If you have to buy friends, something's wrong with what's going on. But the truth is, it's not correct. The whole point of friendship, and this is what the mission is saying, is it's two ways. A friendship has, unlike the student-teacher relationship, in which the teacher gives and the student receives, and that's the nature of the relationship, and it would be inappropriate for it to become a friendship. With a friendship, it's two ways, and that's why the language of is used. Acquire for yourself. Friends is you give and you take, and it's a two-way relationship. Bina, insight, says the Vilna Gaon, is a friendship with information. A chacham just receives. A bina, they give back because they're understanding one thing from another thing. Insight is achieved. And the Vilna Gaon says that often the best way of achieving bina, of achieving insight, is by having a chavrusa, having a study partner. That means to say, you question, you challenge, you one person innovates, the other one argues with it. And out of that emerges an increase in understanding. Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish were chavrusas, and after Reish Lakish tragically died young, Rabbi Yochanan mourned the loss of his chavrusa and fell into depression. And the Gemara says eventually his friends, the other sages at the time, found for him a new chavrusa. And Rabbi Yochanan didn't enjoy his new chavrusa. And he said, everything I say to my new chavrusa, he brings proof for. With Reish Lakish, everything I said, he challenged. And Memela, as a result of the challenge, Rav Shmaitza, the Shmaitza, the hearing increased. Shmiya, Shmaitza is the learning. The learning using the faculty of hearing. Hearing is that which we receive from our teachers. How can what we hear increase? That's the quality of bina, of understanding, of building more. I've received a certain amount of hearing, and now Rav Shmaitza, there's a revach, there's a profit. It expands. So the expansion of that which we heard is what you need a chavrusa for. And you can only have a chavrusa if they challenge and there's a give and a take. That's knei l'chachave. If it's a two-way relationship in which there's a purchase and a transaction taking place. So that says the Vilna Gaon is v'yosef lakach, that yishma chacham, v'yosef lakach. The chacham has shmiya, he hears, and it's lakach, it's that which he takes. However, the novon tachbulos, it's intertwining strands and it's connecting, and therefore yikneh, that's purchased. It's two ways. It's a kinyan. It's a relationship. Here we have a normal flickering light problem here. Okay, that's the kinyan. That's the two-way relationship that you have. So that's pasuk vav. Pasuk zayin. That's pasuk hey. Pasuk vav. Pasuk 6. Again in the handouts for those who joined. I'll just put the on the link again that you can click on this. Again, I don't want to belabor pasuk Vov too long. Lahovin moshel umelitza divrei chachomim v'chedoisam. To understand that moshel is parable and melitza is interpretation. So the moshel is the external, the story, for example, that you tell in the parable, and the melitza is the insight that you achieve, the inner vision behind it. And that parallels divrei chachomim, the words of the wise, v'chedoisam, and their riddles. Now, this pasuk is structured in what's known in literature as a chiastic structure, which means it goes in reverse form. So you have A, B, and then B, A. So it's sort of mirror structure. So you have moshel or melitza. Moshel is the parable, the external structure. Melitza is from the internal insight. You have, for example, the word melitz with Yosef, I think it's used. The interpreter stood between them. What's that we have in Balkorians? What's the language of the pasuk? Melitz in Mekates, yeah. So with Yosef, when the interpreter stands between them, the interpreter is called the melitz. So the meaning of the word melitz is interpretation. So you have the moshel, which is the parable, the external structure, and then the melitza, which is, or if you like, the metaphor, and the melitza is the internal interpretation of it. Then you have divrei chachomim, the words of the wise, which is their external, which is the internal quality of what they say. And then chedosom is their riddles, meaning the external structure that they give, the sort of superficial external structure there is. So you have A, B, B, A. You have external, internal, internal, external. That's the structure of the pasuk. Now, the Vilna Gaon here explains that first of all, these two levels, or this double expression is referring to either the written Torah and the oral Torah, or the worlds of Medrash. So let's just talk about this for a couple of minutes. The Vilna Gaon says that the moshel, very interesting, the parable is Torah shebechsav, is the written Torah. You look at the written Torah and you can understand it on a basic level. It says, don't do this, do that. Eat matzah, blow shofar, don't steal, honor parents, etc. So the written Torah gives the external structure, quite a daring statement of the Vilna Gaon. He says that's the moshel, that's the parable, that's the external structure. Melitza, which is the interpretation, that's Torah Shebal Peh. If you want to know what it really means, if you want to understand the meaning behind it, the content, the inner message, the depth of halachic practice. Okay, how actually do I blow shofar? What does it look like? How do I blow? What sounds do I have to make? What's the way to fulfill this mitzvah? What are the parameters of it? What values is it trying to embody? You don't see any of that in the written Torah. The written Torah really doesn't give you any of those details. It barely explains anything, if ever, about the reasons behind mitzvahs, what quality it's meant to embed you with, and how it's meant to form you. Nor does it explain the halachic details of how this is meant to be done. So that's the two parts of this. And similarly, divrei chachomim, the chedosom, the words of the wise, and the enigma is the external metaphor or the internal quality of what they're trying to say, and the riddle-like manner in which this is often expressed. Okay, let's move on to the next pasuk, because here we're now entering into the content of Mishley, and I do want to focus for a few minutes on this, and then try and just draw out sort of a summary in a sense, because we've had this sheer split by 3 weeks, and we've spent so much time talking about wisdom and foolishness, and I just want to try and give you a sense of what this means. And I suppose if there's one thing that I say that is worth writing down, it'll be what I say after we finish pasuk Zayin, pasuk 7. So pasuk 7 says something very important. This in the structure of the Vilna Gaon is really the beginning of the contents of Mishley, and it's the first time that Mishley overtly, in a sense, turns from. In other words, it says, okay, what's this all about? Till now, he said, I'm going to be telling you wisdom. Shlomo is living in an era known in the secular world as the era of wisdom literature. He's not the only person writing wisdom literature. It's a time in history when people are interested in wisdom, and they're interested in how to improve life. And there's a whole realm in the ancient Near East in that era of wisdom. We have in our tradition one that remains, outside the Tanakh, which has been Sirah, right? He writes wisdom. He lives considerably after the date that we understand of Mishley, but nonetheless, part of sort of that genre of wisdom literature. Shlomo Melech is writing it, but he's not just writing it as a wise person. He's arguing that this will get you to live a life, a more inspired life, a life of deeper connection to Hashem. So here we get to Pasuk Zayin. This is the critical Pasuk in terms of the actual content of Mishley. Yiras Hashem Reishis Das. The fear or maybe awe of Hashem is the beginning of knowledge. Chochma umusa evilim bozu. Wisdom and rebuke the fools or skeptics scorn. So let's just talk a little bit about translation. The first thing it says is, on the most basic level, is that it argues that fear of Hashem is the beginning of knowledge. In other words, fear of Hashem has to precede knowledge. The Mishnah famously in Ova says, Kol sheyiras chetoi, this is Chanina ben Nosa in the 3rd chapter of Ova's, Kol sheyiras chetoi, anyone whose fear of sin precedes their wisdom, the wisdom will endure. So this can be on a practical level. Someone who isn't motivated won't end up as a wise person. If you're not God-fearing, you won't be motivated to seek wisdom appropriately. It can also mean that with fear of Hashem has to be a foundation. Otherwise, all the wisdom is built on flimsy foundations, and the wisdom can end up rocking your faith. The Vilna Gaon says if you have fear of Hashem, it means you want to avoid spiritual danger. You want to know what the spiritual goals are, and since you are God-fearing, therefore you are seeking. And since you're seeking, when you find Chokhmah, you'll hold it tight and it will endure. Whereas if you don't, then you won't persist. That's the basic level. In a moment, I want to talk about a higher level of understanding this. But before we do that, I just want to move on to the basic translation, the second part of the pasuk. Chokhmah musa evilim bozu. The skeptic scorns wisdom and rebuke. So here, the Rav Shimshon Hirsch. Again, we're going to try and bring this all together in a few minutes just to understand the different terms. But what's the etymology of the word evilim, which is a type of skeptic or fool? Very interesting. Rav Shimshon Hirsch links, and the Malbim, I think, links the meaning of the word to the word ulai, perhaps. An evil, aleph vav, yud lamed, is someone for whom everything is doubtful. Everything is questionable. In other words, they're not able to concretize themselves. They're not able to tie themselves down. Everything they hear, they say, yeah, maybe yes, maybe not. Nothing. Everything is tentative. There's no clarity and certainty. In other words, we sometimes think that a skeptic is a very wise person. Right? Someone who's skeptical and they question everything. You think there's a certain wisdom to that, like they want to make everything very, very solid. But the point that Shlomo is making is that there's an over-skepticism which drives out the possibility of any clarity. Rav Hirsch suggests it's also linked to the word afela, which means murkiness. The evil and afela, or the first sounds are very similar. And Rav Hirsch, again, there's not time to explore his grammatical theories too fully, but he thinks that afela, ofel, and evil are related words. Afel means dusk is called afela. When it gets murky, when all shapes are mixed up and you can't see anything clearly and no boundaries are delineated properly. And this is the evil, the ulai person, the maybe person. Nothing is clear. They never persist in trying to clarify something till they can actually anchor themselves and tie themselves down. In other words, there is a wisdom in tentativeness, maybe this and maybe that, and this could be and that could not be. But then you have to get to action. You have to actually know where you are. And at the point of action, you have to make a decision. If you allow yourself to always be caught up in tentativeness and never arrive at anything conclusive, you can never act, you can never go forward, you can never do anything. So the extreme skeptic retreats into a certain pseudo-fake cleverness, because it's very easy to be skeptical of everything. Who says and how do I know and can you really prove it? And the answer is there's actually most things in life we can't arrive at a sort of if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C type proof. You can't arrive at a proof on the level of deductive logic. But then what do? Are you paralyzed with uncertainty? Are you unable to function? Are there any other areas in which the skeptic lives consistently like this? If the skeptic wants to be skeptical about everything, then do they know their own existence? Do they know about belief in anyone else? Do they know that the food they eat is safe? Do they know that the electricity can work? In other words, what does it mean to be an extreme skeptic? If you challenge everything, how that there are people who discover after many years of marriage that really their spouse is a secret service agent in the employ of a foreign country as a these stories happen, right? Someone is, as the Iron Curtain falls, someone in West Germany discovers that a civil servant in the foreign ministry discovers that their spouse was a East German Stasi spy. It's possible. Well, if it's possible, how do I know that everything I know about my life isn't fake? How do I know anything that I believe to be true is true? If you really want to be that skeptical, then you're paralyzed. There's no possibility of living. The skeptic adopts an arbitrary boundary to their skepticism, in which they conveniently position themselves when it comes to matters of morality or spirituality with an maybe not. This is the person who is proof against Chochmah and Musa. They can never ignore any Chochmah and Musa. So Shlomo Melech, who knows a thing or two about skepticism, after all, he wrote his other works in which he explores this, says that you can end up so skeptical that you just put yourself in a place of complete uncertainty and paralysis, and you can't know anything at all. Yes?
I think in Kohelet there is a similar process. Like Yiras Hashem or something. I'll see if I can find it. I think it's a similar argument. The end of Kohelet.
The Kohelet ends with Sof Davar Kol Nishma Es Elokim Yorei Kizeh Kol Adam. At the end of everything, this is what you should hear: fear God. So what Kohelet is his conclusion, in Mishley is his starting point. Very interesting. Yes. So Kohelet concludes with Sof Davar. A note of this. Yeah, that's how Kohelet it concludes. But here he calls it. Here he says it's the beginning of Das. Reishis Chochma Yos Hashem also is a pasuk that Shlomo HaMelech says. So I just want to talk a little bit about, on a deeper level, what it means to say that the beginning of wisdom is fear of Hashem. And here I want to say my own reading in the language of the Rambam, and I wrote an essay about this for those who are interested in a book that was recently published, looking at the interplay between Strauss, who was a German-American philosopher in the post-war era, Spinoza, the famous Spinoza, and Judaism. And the argument I make is that, and I think this is the view of the Rambam, and I think this is one reading in the Pasuk, is that rather than belief needing to be philosophically grounded in, as per some approaches to belief, there are approaches to belief that argue that belief in Hashem should be grounded in the argument from design, or the like, in other words, or cosmological argument, first cause principle, and all these sorts of things. The Rambam, who is often claims that he arrives at belief through philosophy, I actually think that basic belief in a first cause and a root of all existence, the Rambam actually states as an axiom, in other words, as an assumption, which is followed by everything else he says. And the Rambam introduces his work, his Mishnah Torah, and he says, I think, a parallel to this pasuk. He says, Yesoda Yesodos, v'omet hachachmas. Yesoda means the foundation of all foundations. V'omet hachachmas, and the pillar on which wisdom stands is leida, to know sheyesh motzi rishon, to know that there is a first cause, to know that there is a God. In other words, the Rambam is arguing that the foundation of knowledge is belief in Hashem and transcendence, rather than the result of knowledge being belief in Hashem and transcendence. In other words, it's not I believe, therefore, it's not that it is reasonable, therefore I believe, but rather I believe, therefore it is reasonable. This is a quote from Anselm of Canterbury, a scholastic Christian philosopher in the medieval period. And I think he's expressing the same idea, that one way of thinking about life is that if everything is chaotic, we humans take as axiomatic that there is meaning to life and purpose to life, and that we can make sense of things, and that there's a narrative to things, and we can string things together with this chevel that we spoke about before, this rope. So we come in with an axiom or an assumption that things should make sense. Because we have that assumption, we can now embark on our quest to pursue wisdom. But I have a question for you. What gives us the right to that assumption? Who says we live in a world in which things make sense and should make sense? What gives us the assumption that there should be a moral universe and that things should be reasonable? There's a profound, almost philosophical question around our very operating system, around our very working assumptions, which is that we take it as axiomatic that we live in a world that makes sense. And following that, now we can probe and try and understand something about reality. What gives us the ability to have that assumption that things make sense? So this is again, I don't want to shift this Mishlei into philosophy. This is something I think I perhaps have explored on Sunday morning, and perhaps we could again. But the very axiom, the very assumption that things make sense, upon which everything else that follows is built, maybe because we understand that we live in a universe in which there is purpose. We live in a universe which is purposeful, which has a goal and a direction and an achievement and a meaning to it. Another word, synonym for meaning, is yiras Hashem, fear of Hashem. Yiras Hashem doesn't just mean fear of Hashem, the lower level of fear that I'll get punished if I don't fear God, but it means awe of transcendence. We discussed this last week when we spoke about Shamayim, that which is beyond. So awe of Hashem, in other words, an awareness that I live in a universe which has a purpose and meaning to it, isn't the result of wisdom, but is the axiom, the premise, the foundation upon which all wisdom is built. Because I live in a universe that has meaning and purpose, I therefore can expect this universe to make sense, and I can now try and string things together and read it. What would allow me to assume that the universe makes sense, other than it being a universe that has a meaningfulness and a direction to it? Just to join the dots over here, for those who are interested, I gave a share a while back on Parshas Lech Lecha, and then I think sorry we carried on. For some reason we missed out Vayera that time. And I mentioned the reading of the Medrash, in which Avram wanders through the world, and he sees a bira delakas. He sees a burning castle, and he says, there can't be, how can there be this mansion without a manhig, without a designer or a director? Miyad hates it of Balabira. Immediately the owner of the palace looks out at him and says, I am Hashem. So the Medrash is giving a summary of Avram's journey to belief. Now the story is normally read as, he sees a bira delakas, a beautiful lit up mansion, ablaze with lights and chandeliers, and he says the argument of design. How can such a palace exist by itself? There must be a builder to this palace, and Hashem reveals himself to Avram. So in that model, Avram is arriving at belief in Hashem through the argument from design. But there's another reading of the Medrash in which the Medrash is saying something very different. He sees bira delakas, he sees a burning palace, and which is the normal meaning of the word delakas. And he says, this palace, how can this palace not have a manhig? Manhig means a director, a manager. How can it be that the world is ablaze and burning and has no purpose to it and no direction to it? There must be a purpose and direction to life. It must have a creator who imbues it with existence, and that's what leads him to an awareness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So I think the Rambam, in opening his Mishnah Torah, is really just quoting this pasuk. He says, the foundation of wisdom is yiras Hashem, is awareness of transcendence, awareness of a first cause, and everything else is built on that. So if we ask ourselves, what is the axiom of all axioms? We have various assumptions about in life, which are the very tools that we use to reason and to navigate. They're not provable because they're the very tools of reason. Axioms of if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C, or if A is bigger than B and B is bigger than C, then A equals C. The basic principles of logic, the basic principles of morality, that to torture a small child for fun is wrong. These very axiomatic assumptions, can we say anything deeper than them? Are there axioms that lie behind the axioms? Foundations of foundations, axioms of axioms? The answer is yes, an assumption that the world has to make sense. And that assumption is built on belief rather than belief being built on wisdom. So again, just because I like this idea, line because it summarizes it from Anselm of Canterbury, he says it's I believe, therefore it is reasonable is the correct way to think about it, rather than the way we often think about it, which is it is reasonable, therefore I believe. I think that's one reading of this pasuk. Is this okay? Okay, so that's the assumption. In which case, the second half of the pasuk is that the evil, the ulai person who doesn't accept axioms, is the person who doesn't derive that. If you are ulai, you're tentative in your conviction that the world has to make sense and has to have meaning and has to have morality to it, then you won't be able to learn chachma or musa. That's the translation of the pasuk in this reading. What I want to do is take a piece from Rabbi Shimshon Hirsch now and really just try and summarize. He so beautifully, as with so much else that he does, summarizes the terms, and I didn't print the source, summarizes what we've learned so far. And with this, really, I'll conclude today's learning. And as I said, if there's one thing that's worth writing down, I think it is this. He says that we have so many different terms here, basically in Mishley, for wisdom and for fools. For wisdom, we have seichel, we have chochma, we have bina and tzavuna, we have das, we have eitzah, we have mezima, we have armor, we have tachbula. These are the last pasukim we've learned. So just in the last 6-7 pasukim that we read, we have so many different terminologies for wisdom and so on. And what I really want to do is just use him as a summary, because we've had these weeks, and I suspect all of us have emerged a little confused from these 3 weeks of learning. Which is, how do all these pasukim come together? What actually is Shlomo HaMelech saying over here? Is there anything we can take out of this in terms of trying to build a life for ourselves? And Rav Hirsch so beautifully says, he says, I'm going to take one case study of one mitzvah, and I'm just going to show how the terms apply for the different levels. So he says, let's take lo sachmoid. Don't be covetous. Don't covet. Don't be jealous. So he says, I hear that. That's Shemiah, I've heard those words. I've now received a bit of chokhmah, a bit of wisdom. Don't covet. That's the use of the word chokhmah. Now, I may try and go a little bit deeper. And I may say, okay, why shouldn't I covet? And the answer is because lusting after things damages my own inner purity. It can lead to using things which are forbidden, pressuring people to take things from them, stealing. So there's reasons and logics behind it.
I think the other says it's one of the things that takes you out.
In one of the things that takes you out of the world, exactly. So it can destroy my moral fiber. Okay. Now, based on that insight, Bina, I can now extrapolate. And I can say, okay, lo sachmod can even apply when I pay someone for something. Nonetheless, if it's something I covet, even I've bought it, you could take a market economics view of this. If I've paid for it, what could be wrong with it? There's no immorality in paying someone for something. But if I've pressured them into selling it to me, or I've coveted it, maybe there's even an immorality into it. Now, Hirsch uses an example because, of course, this is exactly what Chazal say in the pasuk, that Osachmot is when you pressure someone to sell something to them. So, okay, I've started with Chokhmah. I received a bit of wisdom. Don't be jealous. Okay, I now know something I didn't know. Don't be jealous. I've received instruction from Hashem. Now, Bina, Maven Dava Metoch Dava, because I reflected, I achieved some insight. I was able to extrapolate and understand when this applies. That's the quality of Bina or Tavana. I now try to integrate that with my personality. What are the things in life that tempt me? What's my nature? What things attract me? What are my inner insecurities and vulnerabilities that lead me to being jealous of other people and things that they have? How do I operate? What are the lenses and the eyes through which I look at life? And I begin molding my personality towards it. That's Das. You remember we said Das is knowledge integration. So Das always has an intimacy associated with it. It's a connecting word. When I connect with something, the biblical knowing means relationship. Adam Yod es Chava, he knew Chava, means there was an intimate relationship between them. They merged their identities. They got to know each other. So that's Das. Lo Sachmod, not only is it I got a piece of wisdom, Chachma, don't be jealous. Not only did I have Bina, Maven Dava, Mitoich Dava, to extrapolate one thing from another and to get insight into what the quality of the Torah, why does the Torah say don't steal? Don't be jealous? What's it telling me about life? And therefore, how can I extrapolate it? But now I have Das, I've integrated it into my personality. Okay, all of this is very nice, but am I actually willing to act on it? Do I see this as taking me forward in my life? That's Eitzah. Eitzah means advice. Advice means I have a goal, and Advice gives me the ability to get to that goal. What are the ideas that will get me to the goal? So this is now Eitzah. Lo Sachmod will take me somewhere. It will enrich me. It will achieve something for me. I'm determined, therefore, to do it. That's the quality of Eitzah. Then we have Mezima. Again, these are all words that I hope you remember from previous weeks. Mezima means I now need to plan. So how am I going to live my life? I have to make plans about how to achieve this. It's not enough just to have the insight, the academic insight. It's not even enough to have the determination, but I have to start planning my life. I have to set myself a project of how am I going to live a Torah life? How am I going to do the mitzvahs? That's the quality of Mezima. Again, I remind you the etymology of Mezima, to plot, like Dayan Zobin are people that plot. And so Mezima means I have to plot out now. I have to chart the course of how I'm going to achieve it. Now, it's not enough, though, just to chart things, because sometimes there are pitfalls on the way. Sometimes there are challenges. Sometimes there are temptations. Sometimes there are tools and techniques that I need to implement. Psychological understanding. Sometimes the Rambam famously explains, I need to go to one extreme in order to get myself back to the middle. That is armor. Armor is cunning. We saw the word armor can be used in a negative sense, in which you trick people, but armor can also be used in the positive sense as a shrewdness, a certain wisdom. In other words, again, I remind you about the Vilna Gaon at the beginning, in which he said that there is seichel iyuni, there's abstract wisdom, academic wisdom, and then there's seichel masi, which is practical wisdom. You can be a chopom, the wisest person in the world, and know lo sachmod, and know many, many other things. You can know all the mitzvahs and all the halachas. But armor is about being wise and cunning in how you implement this, how you have shrewdness and cunning in ensuring that you actually can conquer your covetous inclination. So that's armor. And finally, we have tachbulas. Tachbulas are strategies, are stringing things together, are combinations. In other words, sometimes a desire can be so strong that I have to think of several combinations. I have to build that rope, which will be strands of intertwining things in order to reach somewhere that by myself I won't be able to reach. A rope is a tool or device that we humans make in order to go further than I could, and also to bind ourselves up. What are the strategies that I need of combining different different qualities in order to ensure that I will be victorious? So these are the different terms, and I think dare I say it, in the whole of sort of history of Jewish thought, I don't think anyone has ever done what Rav Hirsch does in that short balance, because he takes everything we've been learning in this confusing swirl of Pesukim, with the Vilna Gaon and the Malbim and everything else, of all these terminology, and he builds it into such a clear structure about what each term means. And I would really say in one's life, have this list of these qualities, and every time you learn something new, think, okay, how can I now translate them into these terms that follow? So you learn a new halacha, okay, I've achieved some chachma. What lies behind this halacha? What is it extrapolated to? That's bina. Now let me think about my own personality. What inner weaknesses make this challenging for me? How can it affect how I view the world? That's going to be da'as. Then, do I see how it's an eitzah? Do I see how it will advance my goals? Do I see the path that will take me along? That's eitzah, the advice. Mezima is planning the nature of my contact. Armor is a cunningness about it. Do I need to avoid certain situations that will trigger it? Do I need to go to one extreme? And then tachbulas are strategies. There's going to be times when it's too complicated. Too challenging, I'm sorry, so too drawing, too overwhelming. How can I bind myself up? Is it making a commitment to someone? Is it having someone check in to me? Is it setting a filter on something? You know, what are the external structures that I can put in place in order to achieve it? So it's such a beautiful summary. Now, just to speak a little bit about some of the negative terms associated with this, because again, we've met many terms of negativity around this. So just to remind you, we have a pesi. So a pesi is, here I'm drifting a little bit away from Hirsch back to the Vilna Gaon. A pesi is someone who is a fool. They are superficial. We saw language of it's a pasuk actually in Mishley later in chapter 14, pasuk 15. Pesi yamin chol davar, the fool, the pesi, believes everything. A pesi is easily seduced. That's the literal meaning of the word pesi. There's the ones from a fateh, in the Torah, the victim of rape and the victim of seduction, of seducing. A pesi is someone who is superficial and shallow, and they're drawn after shallowness. That's one type of foolishness. Then there is the late, who is the scoffer. The scoffer enjoys emptiness. They enjoy gossip and mockery, and that's sweet to them. And finally, there is the ksil, is the fool. That's the person who lacks endurance and hard work. They're not willing to put the hard work and discipline into things. And Hirsch says the common name for all of these in Mishley is the Evil, which we already discussed, the Ulai personality, or Ophel, someone who lives in darkness. The final point he makes, which I think is again another, again, it doesn't need my approval, but I think is another fantastic point, is there is one word for foolishness that does not appear in Mishley, but appears in Koheles. And this is the word sochel or sichlus, samach kaf lamed or samach kaf lamed vav tof, which is used in Koheles to describe a fool, and never in Mishley. Now, the word sichlus, samach kaf lamed, is very similar to the word seichel, which means intelligence, sin kaf lamed. And Hirsch suggests that the sochel, the fool in Koheles, is someone who has a philosophical turn of mind, like seichel, but unfortunately their speculative philosophical turn of mind has turned them astray, and they've gone awry with their philosophical reasoning. In which case we understand why that figure appears in Koheles, but doesn't appear in Mishley, because Koheles is dealing with the person who's gone astray through philosophy. Mishley, in a sense, is not Shlomo HaMelech's philosophical work. That was Koheles. Mishley is Shlomo HaMelech's work of parables, his book of integration, his book of Musa, of how can I take wisdom and my lived real experience of the real world and draw out of that wisdom which will affect my life and help me live. So the sochel, that word for fool, is a Koheles word, someone who's philosophically astray, and that's not the figure that that Mishley is addressing. Mishley is addressing the Bal Musa, the person who wants rebuke, who wants to integrate that into their lived experiences. So that's Rav Hirsch's summary, really, of all the terms we've learned now, and I think it's indescribably beautiful because he just draws together the threads that we had in our sort of confusing 6 psukim that we've learned and tries to bring out what emerges from that all. Okay. Yes. No, okay. So I apologize. I said at the beginning I wanted to finish early today because I have another commitment that starts in about 10 minutes I have to get to. So that draws us to a close of the introduction of Mishley. I'll try and give one more share in which I draw out sort of big themes, other big themes of Mishley. But I think this introduction really is, in a way, setting the agenda that Shlomo Melech sets for himself for the rest of the book. So I thank all of you for joining, particularly those who, with great dedication, didn't join the. I actually asked my wife advice whether I should cancel today or not, because I thought that I'm delighted to see a very large turnout online also, so that's good. Moshe, have a good evening. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Dayan Zobin.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Ah, okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Okay.
Time for a very quick question.
Even more dedication, even more Messiah. Sorry?
Time for a very quick question.
Time for
A very quick question.
Yes, of course. Yeah.